Welcome.
Welcome, everyone. We'll start in a few moments.
Hi, everyone. Should I start? Are we ready to go?
Nadesh will introduce you.
All right, Nadesh.
Okay, well, welcome, everyone. Happy Friday. Thanks for joining us today for the third session in a series of Tech Trends Speaker Series sessions. I'm Nadesh Versova, the Director of the Administration Governance Domain at the McGill School of Continuing Studies. Welcome. And today we'll talk big data, AI, and data governance. So as companies generate more data, move it to the cloud, and develop then AI models that we discussed at the second session in March, if you remember, they need to consider comprehensive approach to data governance. Why? Why does data governance matter? So to help us to answer this question today, we invited an expert in the field, Evren Eryurek. Evren is the leader of Google's data discovery, protection, and governance platform as a member of Google core team. He joined Google as the first external member to take a leadership role as a technical director within the CTO office of Google Cloud. And prior to joining Google, he was the senior VP of software chief technology officer for GE Healthcare. Before joining GE, Evren was with Emerson Process Management Group for over 11 years, where he held several leadership positions and was responsible for developing new software-based growth technologies for process control systems and field devices, coordinating cross-divisional product execution and implementation. So without further ado, please welcome Evren. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Nadesh. I'm really excited to be here, everyone. I spent almost all my career somehow, well, somewhere or another, with these very highly regulated industries, whether it was in the process world, transportation, healthcare, or finally in Google, helping many platforms in that. And so today I'm going to cover some essence of our book, what we're doing. But I want to cover at first, and I added this just for this session, so that we can understand what's happening. Now, this is one of my favorite quotes that I use as part of this presentation, and this hasn't gotten old. And I don't know that it will change in the 22nd century. Data will always be a key for any industry. Now, it hasn't just happened in this century. Go back, however far you want to go back, you will always see data is part of this mission critical systems that we have. Early on, it was agriculture. Everybody was trying to figure out the sun, the soil's richness, and so forth. And then the navigation, exploration, think about what was happening. And we've gone through manufacturing, it has changed tremendously. All the research that we're seeing right now, and all of a sudden, Gen AI. Now, I am a second generation AI student. When I did my master's and PhD, we didn't have the tools that today all the kids have in their hands, and recently it has gotten even richer. So, when I look back, one of the things that I hear from everyone I talk to, these will be your peers, your bosses, your companies that you're working. We have a lot of challenges around data. One of them will tell you, well, there's a lot of data in different formats. I don't know what to do with it. That's very true. You're probably hearing it in the Gen AI world with different nuances. Some of this data is good data, some of this data is really bad data, not even accurate data, and it comes in multi formats. So when we say structured and unstructured, so think of it this way. If you can actually picture it in a spreadsheet, in columns and so forth, that's your structured data. As I'm speaking and using this video, using my voice, all that is also data, but it is unstructured data. Dealing with it is different. Now, what we are doing is real time. Everybody is gotten used to how to deal with these systems, interact with these systems in real time. So streams, the video stream is real. I'm sending it to you, you're receiving, we're going to interact. At rest, you're going to actually take that book that they shared with you, you're going to read it and whatever. That is also a part of the data that we just exchanged with one another. And not to mention, to make things more complicated, where this data is sitting, how it is transacting between the clouds, the on premises, your laptops, and so forth, it's all creating some kind of a challenge to the organizations. There was a period we thought everything was about SQL, but it is much more than SQL. Now you're seeing machine learning, AI, all these, everything is data driven. In when we first looked at all these challenges, most people were sort of dabbling with the AI based applications. There's a shift, significant shift. I was just reading a recent article from one of the research companies, a massive infrastructure shift in every enterprise company. Not to mention schools, universities, all these institutions are trying to figure out what AI means to them. What really worries me is underlying systems that we had for data, big data usage, and what it is that we can do with it was not quite there for some, maybe for many. Now we're going to try to do and use and utilize, make part of our daily lives, this Gen AI world. That is going to be an interesting challenge for everybody because that data reaches everybody. It is part of your mission critical system and accessed everywhere by everyone. Now, this becomes even bigger problem for those who are tasked to drive this. Now, I use this chart. It is changing. Was just looking at it the other day to see if there was any change in the worries that the CDOs had, the CIOs have. Chief data officer, chief digital officer, you name it. The worries didn't change, but some of these things started going upwards. For example, now everybody's talking about enabling predictive analytics with AI and ML. Why? They actually think they can use these tools readily available. Then, of course, they're seeing, oh, of course, I have to actually make sure proper data is in place for me to be able to use it for simple things or for really complex things. Like if you're in a bank and you're going to give people credits or not, and if you want to use an AI system, well, you really need to have a better AI the database, the data structure underneath it to be able to get the most out of your AI systems. So quality and the trust that you're going to have in that data is still the number one use case. Now, how we're using it is real time because we're interacting with it all the time. That's an added complexity for everyone in the system. Each and every one of these schools, enterprises, individuals, small businesses, large businesses, they're all trying to be much more data driven. But that said, culture, it's not really happening over time. You really need to be thinking about what it is that we can do. It starts with establishing leadership with data driven mindsets, establishing a focus on how we're going to change our culture. These chief data and analytics officers are out there, and many of them are suffering because A, they don't know what their mission is and how they're going to be successful, and B, the tools that they're given are not really helping them. It's very difficult, but still they're establishing those roles to really go there. We got to be thinking differently. We are going to be have to be very comfortable with failing fast and learning faster as we are doing this, because this is not going to be any easier. Just now we have all these gen AI tools and so forth. It's going to get even more complex, so we have to be thinking differently. Focus on the long term, focus on what you have, what your mission is as a company, and then drive where we can go. Now, this was sort of my intro for why this is happening. And I'm going to talk about what is data governance from different aspects of it and some tools. All of you have access to the ebook that your school has, which is such a great, rich opportunity. And I'm very thankful for everyone who participated in the book. And thank you for reading. And I'm always available. Goal of our text was at least to help bring some sanity, bring some simplicity, what data governance means. Remember, when we began this journey, this was about 4 or 5 years ago, and book got published about 3 years ago. It's still in the top 5 books in its category, and it is there. The goal is there to help organizations ask the right questions, provide some thinking around the tools and techniques and approaches. We're well aware that there is no one size fits approach when it comes to data governance. So take it with that and go with it and utilize it. But there's more, but keep asking those questions. And there's more curiosity behind it. When I'm asked what is data governance, it's all about trust. Whether you trust the security and the quality of the data, or you trust the reliability of your data access. This is all about trust. If there's one word, that would be trust. And I think it applies to every industry, every system that we're going through. And it wasn't new. Some of you may be young enough, may not remember this, but prior to 2017, there were some issues taking place. And it actually forced systems to think differently. There were who's going to own the data discussions. And then the financial crisis happened, regulatory things came about in 2008, and there were much more desirable systems towards centralization of data governance organizations so that the audits could be taking place and so forth. The theory was data governance needed to be a centralized organization primarily located in IT. That has changed. That's changing. Doesn't matter in which organization data governance sits, because right now it's chief data officers, they are owning it, chief digital officers, they are owning it. I've seen it, CFOs owning this program. But what matters is there has to be a really solid program around it. We were given the permission to use this from Forrester. And when data governance comes to rescue, it is a strategic program that sets the policies in place and procedures to really help organization maximize the utilization of the value of the data and how they can actually use that in the decision making process. It's all about that. So we have taken all this into account, and we're looking at it. What is driving these initiatives? We're seeing the complexity and the growth in the data. We're also seeing global changes in the regulatory approaches, whether it's GDPRs, the CCPAs, to HIPAAs, and whatever it might be. Just about every country in the world has some kind of a regulatory system in place around data. Europe is very active. Europe is changing this all the time. There's new ones coming up. Stay tuned for those, especially if you're paying attention to Gen AI and how they're going to regulate and govern. That's going to change as well. We haven't seen the last phases on this one. It's just the beginning in it. Risk management is really essential. People are worrying about it, whether it's in the financial statements or health, or it doesn't matter. And the breaches, operational efficiency really is driving this, because one thing you can do is you can lock everything down, don't do anything, don't use your data for anything. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. You just disabled your entire organization from making the right calls, right decisions, or even be profitable or be good to the environment, because it doesn't have to be a profit company, for-profit company. It is a non-profit organization struggling with the same problems to do good, but they want to do it within the guidelines of the systems that they are dealing with. And finally, we see and hear a lot of lack of control, so that's driving some of these initiatives. In the end, it boils down to three things: policies that you're going to establish, excuse me, people who are going to be actually using these systems and training them and educating them and arming them with the right capabilities and tools, and the technology. There are a lot of great systems behind there so that you can actually bring them all together, and it will be part of your successful data governance system. When I get asked, oh, what's the benefit? Is it just policing? Data governance is not policing. It's not about policing people, not policing systems or data, but it is helping guidelines, maybe guardrails towards more efficient operations. It enables revenue growth. We've seen it over and over. When they do this thing right, they can actually see really big change in their organizations. Being a compliant corporate citizen is really important, showing that you can actually be trusted company with your privacy systems, with your security systems. That will help increase these companies' customer satisfaction, and they're actually seeing much more efficient decision making systems, processes in their organizations. If I look at, I get this question often, so I always start putting this slide in here. You can actually take a look at it and see what we normally see in the data governance framework from left to right. So those are your pillars are discoverability. That's all about data, how you're going to classify them, how you establish your lineage strategies and so forth, your data catalogs and all that. And then comes the data management. Usually people mix the discoverability with the data management part. Data management is your lifecycle management. Where is your data going to reside? How are you going to recover the data if something were to happen? So these are different sets of tools. And then the data protection comes into place. How you're going to mask it, encrypt it, who's going to have access, and how you're going to allow audits and so on and so forth. And then the accountability. You're going to see the ethics coming up there. And before Gen AI, we were talking about this. The data ethics is really important. Nowadays, it's even higher importance. Data ownership. Don't take it from, oh, I own this data, so I get to do it. No, we're trying to separate the roles and responsibilities there through policies and standards. So someone owns the cleanliness of the data, how they're going to bring into the system, and so forth. The other person is governed, and I'll share the roles and hats that we have in this space. And then ethics, how you approach it, how you use it, when you use it. Those are all the questions. So these are capabilities that we have in each of these pillars. If you ask the question, why is it particularly important in AI? Now let's think about the impact of the quality and accuracy of the data that is used in these models, AI models, machine learning models. And now think about the privacy and security aspects of that same data that's in there. And I know in my old company that I just retired from, Google, we spent a lot of time, a lot of capabilities, making sure everything is at the utmost level of scrutiny, because it is important to protect the privacy and security of the users when you're dealing with billions. Similarly, my banks, your banks, they're always worrying about that privacy and security. So each of these are particularly impactful for your AI models, because if you've done something wrong, you cannot use it. You have to have systems in place so that you can pull out the bad data, pull out the data that was not yours or whatever, and then redo it. Those are all processes. And transparency and accountability is going to be paramount. I was reading an article just last week again on this very topic, and how, particularly coming from the European Union, they're looking at it, how they're going to ask the companies to show how you build this model, that you're accountable for it, and you know where the data came from, and it is your data. You're seeing, I'm sure you've seen all kinds of court cases already, that people are suing some of these open source companies, why they have used their data. This will pop up left and right going forward in the land of AI and ML. What does data governance mean for Gen AI era? Is another question I get. Well, it relies heavily on the quality of data, as I've been really highlighting it. Think of data as the food for Gen AI. High quality data is really important for high quality outputs. Well, we have a lot of bad data around. If you're just randomly using this data, or the data that you have hasn't been cleansed and so forth, it's going to be really difficult. The trustworthy outputs are going to really be key, and it's going to be done through proper data governance, cleaning up your data, reducing the bias that gives Gen AI systems reliable outputs, enhancing your security, provide safeguards, unlocking the potential. Now, we keep saying there is a lot of value in here. This is not a scary thing, it's a good thing. It has all the potential. Just let the data governance work for you with your Gen AI systems to reach the potential that you can reach as an organization. Now, challenges are still going to be there, and I don't think it's going to get anything any easier anytime soon. Diverse data sources. In the beginning, I said we have a lot of data and in all kinds of formats. Now, in the world of Gen AI, it might be really easy. And if we're lazy, I'm just going to use this. I saw this data and I saw these articles. I'm just going to put it into my LLM and then do my model and see if I can actually do it. Many professors are reaching out to me from different universities, European, Canadian, American universities. We're in trouble. Our students are doing this. Now, we cannot tell them not to use Gen AI tools. We just work with them. I've seen a really good program on TV in high school, an English teacher who was actually teaching the students how to properly use these tools, ask the right questions, challenge the models, challenge the outputs, get something on your own, but it has to be your own. Don't just say, hey, write me this article and then try to pass it on to your professors as it's your article or your teachers. This is a real problem in K through 12 and in colleges. It's the same problem in the work environment as well. This is why the regulations are going to change and it will evolve, and we're going to see some different things coming at us in here. Now, I mentioned some of these things as a challenge in the world of regular data, big data. It's getting even bigger problem in the world of Gen AI. Lineage. Now, you need to know the data sets and their origins. Gen AI can ingest any data from anywhere. That is the problem. Because you need to know where that data came from, whether or not the quality of that data meets the standard that you established is harder. Because the easier we make certain things, the difficult they will become more from the aspects of governing and ensuring the quality is there and we're actually following the rules and the regulations that your organization has set up. Bias, this is really particularly important in the world of Gen AI because it's if you have built-in biases in the system, that output will always be biased. If your LLM is capturing data directly from social media, guess what? There's a lot of biased data in social media. That will result in itself a disaster. Newer data versus existing governance. This is a question that comes often. Governance frameworks are often designed for established data stores. Now, Gen AI thrives in constant learning. Your model is living and breathing. It's always incorporating new information, regulating and updating itself. Therefore, this continuous governance with the new data coming into the model has to be top of mind for you as well. This also goes into that. In the beginning, I mentioned real-time streaming. This is how we're interacting now. Your models are becoming real-time, and you need to really have the proper governance schemes for your systems. And you need to have explainability versus black box models. I remember my first machine learning model in my healthcare days, and it was helping radiologists. But until we could actually prove with exhausting amount of data and outcomes and so forth that the machine learning algorithms that we were building were always going to provide, if not identical, very close to being identical results for given sets of data. Because machine learning to FDA was a black box. How am I going to approach this? This is still a problem. I met with at least two different startups just 2 weeks ago. The discussions all around about that, how we're going to actually provide explainability to these black box approaches of Gen AI tools and models. So in a nutshell, Gen AI is the wild west of data. It's going to be messy, diverse, and constantly evolving. Your data governance for Gen AI has to be flexible, has to be adaptable. Focus on the data. That is the core of it, and it's going to evolve. Just be on top of it, be diligent about it. Regulations is going to be a little difficult when it comes to Gen AI. I don't think we've seen the end of it yet. We're going to see examples around bias and fairness. This is already coming up from the European Union, particularly. We had really good examples with GDPR and CCPA around data privacy, but that is just the beginning of it when it comes to Gen AI and regulations. Security and transparency, I think many companies have done a really good job, especially if you look at the fintech and healthcare. They were way ahead of the system at all times. But now, many are investing in the cybersecurity measures, and it's really good. We really have to do it. It is a ecosystem. Companies, large companies, cloud companies, publicly owned companies, they're all working together in this area. This is really important. One area that's really showing up and changing the game is accountability and explainability. That is really going to be something new, especially if you look at it from Gen AI perspective. And there are tools being developed, there are tools being used. I'm seeing universities adopting new capabilities that they can actually tell. Just like in when looking at the text, whether or not that text was original or not. Now there's really good tools that you can actually detect it. But if you look at this Gen AI based models being able to explain and hold accountable the companies who are creating these is really important. And developments are in flux right now. It's coming in. There's quite a bit to do. What I would say is track developments happening across the board. Conduct your own, if you're in an organization, what is the risk assessment? Go through that. Build the systems that are trusted. And if you're working in multinational company, and if you're working in Europe, wherever you are, it is okay to engage with the regulators. Earlier, the better. Understand where their heads are. You can actually shape it. You can shape it with them for your company, for your industry. Participate in these discussions. It will only happen in that way. I remember seeing this thing in my process control days back in Emerson. There were a lot of new things happening as the digital era was just beginning. And we were sitting side by side, customers, platform owners, and the regulators all together. This triangle is really important, establishing what's good for the industries. I'm going to pause in here, covered a lot of content before we go into some of the nuts and bolts to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Evren. Fascinating. Thanks for sharing the link to your book. I look forward to reading it. We have a question from a participant. Okay, this is about the legislation. So the question is, how about the impact of legislation like Loi 25, if you're familiar with this
I
law?
am not familiar with that. Where is the question so I can actually read it? Maybe is that
It is in the chat. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar with law.
right?
Perhaps, Marie-Josée, would you mind just to elaborate a little bit on that in the chat? Would it be okay? And let me see if there are any other questions.
It's the Quebec privacy law.
Right,
Oh,
Law 25 is the equivalent of GDPR. It
okay.
is privacy law.
So I am not particularly familiar with it, particularly about the Quebec privacy law. But if I were to guess, I don't think it'll be any different than what GDPR and CCPA in California did, and every other country and state is adopting. But that is, in my last couple slides before, I highlighted the privacy that tackles the privacy aspects of it, and I'm guessing it is very similar to that. But maybe Nabil, you're familiar with it. I'm not sure.
Nabil can't talk. He can only write in the chat.
Oh, I see. So I can search for it, but the link was French, and I know my French is not that good.
Okay, perhaps we can get back to this question, and we can reach out to the
Okay.
Jose with the answer later after the webinar.
Yeah,
Works?
absolutely, absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions from the team?
Yes, let me read another question from Nabil. Many of us would be using Gen AI, Gemini, Claude, as it is it from the big organization. How do you deal with data lineage as these systems are black boxes from our perspective?
Very, very good question. Very good question. So the lineage of the model starts from your use cases. What they're giving you is a model, and you're going to be able to say, hey, I am using this model and I'm adding my data to expand or create something that's an addendum. So your responsibility starts from that point on, because the companies, Gemini and Google and Anthropic and so forth, they're going to be accountable how they are building that model. Very good question. It's not very clear yet how this is going to work, but spot on question. I would uh, make the recommendation to start thinking your window. Lineage is all about where you put your window of accountability. I am accountable from this point because I picked this model up that was verified and validated and shared with me, and I acquired it somehow. And then I added this data, and I'm getting this output. Everything in between that box is your accountability from lineage perspective. Very good question. And
Thank you very much, Evren. Think we can carry on. We have 25 minutes left, just to give you a sense of time.
I can, okay, there you go. That's very good. And thank you for that English link. And I will look at it. So I'm going to speed up a little bit now that we have only 25 minutes. I don't think it's going to be too much. So when it comes to the tools, in the beginning, I mentioned there was this set of metadata tools in the discoverability and so forth. This is how we look at it, enabling data management and data governance with active metadata. Active being it's real time, it's always changing, it's always collecting something because things are changing. So active is important in this case for you. And this is going to help you from discovery all the way through establishing your secure systems and data curations and so on. This is sort of the nuts and bolts of it, very important for any industry. And then comes how you really manage the access to the data. Who is going to be giving the permissions, who's the governor of this system, if you will, the data governor, and who's going to be using this data, your analysts, and they're going to have certain set of views and so forth. This is your access management, if you will. And it's set differently for different roles, for different people. But if I look at data from the beginning, so your PII data, PHI data, who can access to what data within the system that's being processed, it could be your Gen AI tool, it could be your database, whatever it is. And regulatory systems like the Quebecs, like the GDPRs and so forth, tells us that, okay, phone numbers are PII, locations are PII, social security numbers are this and that and so forth. All that is done with the sensitivity of the data. In some cases, we actually use it to block it off and so forth. The people and process are really important. Remember the tools, people, process establishes good governance. You should always think three sets of people. You have governors in the system, people who are accountable for how we're going to handle the data and what's the process and the policies and so forth. And then there will be those who will be responsible for carrying out and enforcing the policies to communicate to everyone that was established by the governments. And then the users. Most of us are in this category. We use data, we do things because this is our job. I need to be an analyst and so forth. And I cover this often in my talks, roles versus hats, because I don't want people to feel like you have to double your organization when you're thinking about a healthy data governance processes in your organization. Many of us do this thing. Hats delineate the difference between the role and the job and the title, because same people can actually do different tasks. Well, might be aligned with different roles. It has nothing to do with my job title, what is in my business card or what in my LinkedIn and so forth. And so be flexible with it is perfectly okay. Just don't leave the chicken with the fox in the same location. Just separate them, and that's going to be very easy. In a nutshell, 5 key hats. There's the person whom we call the governor. They are your privacy czars, whomever. They are the people who are going to be held accountable and responsible for the processes, managing the sensitive data and the systems. Your chief data officers, chief financial officer, CIO, CTO, it doesn't matter. In my case, in healthcare, it was me as this CTO. And then you have the data steward. This is sort of a governance work because they're administering the policies in the organization. There's a little bit much more hands-on how and policy is enforced, put in places and so forth. So it's a technical approach for how the processes were established and policies were established. And then there's an independent person whose role might be anything, but their job is, hey, do we really have a system that I can audit and validate and verify that it is actually being established and followed and so forth towards your policies and regulations? And there's a person who owns the data, bringing the data into the system, whether it's through the ETLs and ELTs or scanning the data on the web to bring into your LLMs. These are the people responsible for that. They're actually physically bringing data into use in your organization. And then many of us are the users. I look at the data, I analyze the data, and do something and make charts and drive business decisions and so forth. I'm going to skip this really quick, but this is sort of left to right how it's going in terms of the usage. It's think about when you're thinking through your policies. Assessment and classification is important. Access policies are important. Service controls, platform orchestration, these are really important underlying systems. And it has to be continuous. It has to be monitored all the time. It's not a one-shot thing. It's day in, day out, 24/7. It needs to be optimized. And so when we look at the data governance over a life cycle of the data, there are different aspects come to mind. There is your business metadata, and technical metadata. Why is this important? Because most of you will be dealing with this, and this is where we trip up. This is where I'm willing to bet your Quebec privacy law is going to be helping you how to do it. And I have an example I'll share later on. This is where you actually put your policies and say, hey, this data has to be deleted by this and this date because this user gave me this information only under these conditions for this period of time. Really important. That's your business metadata. In the technical side, maybe you're dealing with tables. In that table, you have PII data, PHI data, when it was dated, and social security numbers and all that stuff. That's technically how you're going to store and structure that data. And you actually provide different annotations to your data. Now, this can't be done manually in many cases because then the volume of data is too much. And there are a lot of tools out there that's readily available for you that you can use, integrate within your system, and establish this for your organization. And I'm skipping some of these quickly, but access level controls on business and technical data is really important. And it's again defined by your governors. Now, this is what I want to highlight. In each country, it's different. It sounds like in Canada, we may have a Quebec and Canada, just like in California, we have CCPA, and there's the US regulatory policies around privacy and security. There's tons of them in here and constantly changing. What can be done? What is a PII? How the data can be classified and so forth. If you're a multinational, this is a full-time effort for every organization to be on top of it. Things are changing. Take a look at this code. When you're sending a wire from one country to another, that code is actually privacy controlled code. In some cases, I think GDPR and CCPA already says that the routers that we are using in our own homes, that is also under that regulatory as well, because it's mine, it's in my house, it's PII. So think all these things and think of the tools that you can put in place. Security number, write it somewhere. They are always shortcutting email addresses and so forth. There's a reason, because their systems are all working it that way. Data quality, I think I have emphasized this often enough today, but it's the
Evren, my apology. Would you mind going back to the previous slide? We lost the sound for a minute or so.
Are you on this slide?
Yeah, data
All right,
mask.
sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So this one, there are tools out there that you can integrate into your systems that actually automatically masks your data, PII and PHI data. It is really important. If you're a financial institution dealing with your users who might be sharing account numbers, the social security numbers, and so forth, and it used to, I remember writing those numbers in a chat and it would just sit there and it's available publicly to anybody. How did I know that person's laptop was not a public laptop and somebody else didn't steal my number? I mean, we were trusting, but we didn't know how to do it 10, 15 years ago. Nowadays, it's all automatic. So what I'm highlighting in here is tools are available. Just be mindful and integrate it into the systems that you're using, your company is using, and your systems are using. And when it comes to, I'm going to pause it here. Are there any questions that I should pause in the last 15 minutes?
We're good now, so you can go with the...
Okay. All right. So data quality, I think I've done enough to emphasize the importance of the quality. So it's the accuracy, completeness, timeliness, and the source of the data. All of them are really important. Data governance is all about trust. If I can't trust my data that is going into my models, into my systems, that's not going to be good for anybody. That is really, really important. Stale data is really not good. Stale data could be as real as, let's say, look, I moved within this country how many times? And all the banks, all the health systems have some portion of the family health information somewhere. And they don't even know. In some cases, I get, we think you're living in Florida. Yes, I lived in Florida in 2005. Here we are. It's almost 20 years later. They think I'm in Florida. It is stale data. They're not dealing with the right data. They're just making everything worse for themselves. Why is it important? Well, it's used in your models. It's used in your decision making. It's poor data will create poor results. So we need manual oversights. We need efficiencies. All these things are really important, but it has to be scalable. So data quality has to be automated for your systems, because an error can be introduced in every part of the stage, from the source to where it was stored to where actually we're processing, bringing things together, creating models and so forth. It could be your data warehouse. It could even be in the end, you may have a typo as part of your report. That's going to really create big problems. So bringing oversight, mindful of it, why that's important really is good. This example is a European example. They were actually using AI in the system. It was an Italian water meter automation system that they had. Unfortunately, they only had really poor, bad data. It was stale, wasn't accurate. In some cases that they discovered, it was made up. They weren't even reading the meters to put it in the system so they could monitor how much water to have where and so forth. And this is real. It just happens to be from an Italian water meter automation system, but it can be anywhere. They had to throw away everything they had. And they did build a really nice model that they thought that they could actually use it. But it was no good. So in the world of AI, it's worse. So think of this data governance policies as a vehicle to govern the quality. Really important for you to think about it from the beginning, what the components will be, and how you can actually establish it for your customers, for yourselves, for your systems. We have a data quality scorecard. We left it in the book as well. These 11 things, you can actually rank your sources based on accuracies and so forth, prioritize which will be governed first. Like banks do this really well. Healthcare does it really well. You can annotate them, the quality information to the data sources themselves. And you can crowdsource quality information from your own users. It's really important, but be very careful with how you put the feedback buttons and so forth. Carry out the scorecards for mergers and acquisitions. There's tons in here that you can do in terms of scorecards. So protection is an everyday thing. It has to be involving all of us. We have to be thinking about day in, day out. There will be bad actors. You're hearing it, seeing it all the time in media. There's all kinds of security breaches taking place. I'm sure many of you within the last month or so have gotten something. Hey, there was a data breach. Here's a tool. Please go activate so we can actually help you monitor your credit score or what have you. It has to be trusted, how the data was processed, was it tampered with, and so forth. These are all important. And not to mention the physical security of the systems, the infrastructures, using the encryption tools and all that. And data classification levels are important. I sort of covered this, really important in terms of establishing it. I'll skip this. The access controls, in two categories. Resource level access controls is usually uniform and it's service level. And then the fine-grained access controls is granular, so it could be at a cell. This cell is protected. Only the CEO gets to see this. Only the CFO gets to see it. Even the CEO doesn't get to see it. That level of flexibility is really important. And you can't have data governance if you don't monitor it, because it needs to be really monitored 24/7. Your quality, lineage, compliance, how the program is doing, your security monitoring. These are all there. There are lots of tools out there that can be used, integrated. And if you're going to build a culture of data privacy and security in this day and age, where Gen AI is changing everything, that is really important. It's even more important than probably 5 years ago. Set the values and the goals at the company level, how it should be handled. You should really have your processes in place when a bad thing happens, how you're going to communicate. Top to bottom, everyone needs to be committed to it. Really have the intention of why we're doing this thing. What's my company tenet? How am I going to really do this thing? How am I going to explain it to the world? Nobody wants to be in the Wall Street Journal in the first thing in the morning with these bad incidents. So providing the training, providing the communication, top down, bottom up, it's the transparency that makes it all happen. The way that I see the future and how Gen AI is going to really work with data governance, I don't think this is a bad thing. It's a good thing. We will see much richer systems with AI-powered data management systems. That's already happening. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in the classifiers. We're seeing it in the monitoring tools. This is already happening. Data quality tools. Building AI responsibly is going to be a paramount for everyone. It's going to be key for everyone to really build ethical, trustworthy applications when it comes to their Gen AI tools and models that they want to use. Effective data governance is going to be essential for anything you want to do, because the tool, the Gen AI capabilities come to our hands is really powerful. There will be the bad actors, but largely we will do all good things. And I'm excited about what each and every one of you will be doing with these capable tools. But be aware, to do good, you really need to have the right infrastructure, right frame of mind, and the framework to provide your outcomes to whomever you're doing it, as a nonprofit or profit, it doesn't matter, but it will help you innovate while you can actually minimize your risk. Now, I think I have given 7 minutes for all of us to ask more questions, but pleasure being in here. Thank you for your time. I hope it's been useful. And now we can go to the questions together.
Thank you very much, Evren. Thanks for simplifying a complex concept. My takeaway from this session is the Gen AI is wild, wild west, and we need a vehicle to ensure the quality of the data. It seems that we have a question, so please go ahead with the question.
Yes, this is Elisa. I have a question. Given your extensive background in the health sector, I know that people often automatically assume that governance is very important in health and finance, as kind of like nice to have in everything else. What's your perception with your experience? Are there kind of levels of difference of priority or importance, or is it equally important for everyone to understand and comply?
Yeah, that's the culture question. It is important for everyone to understand. And where I have seen this really successfully done, every one of us, when we woke up, when we got to work, we all worried about that. It wasn't just for 8 hours, 24/7, we were thinking about it. And it was our culture. And I've seen similar things in my process world as well. Quality was every one of ours responsibility, not the quality managers, not the auditors, not the managers, whatever. We all felt that accountability. We all felt that responsibility towards the quality. The same in healthcare, towards the privacy and protection. This is why some of these industries really established it. That's all they have. They don't know any other way of doing it. I'm glad you asked that question. So if we're going to make it cultural, we're going to really rise together, it can't be, oh, you don't need to worry about this part. There's a group of people who will worry about it. That becomes policing. It becomes us against them kind of a culture as well. And you don't want that. Thank you for that question. It was really nice. More.
Thank you, Evren. Great question from the group. All right, we have another question from Maria Braddock. What is there is resistance, meaning not everyone cares the same way about quality?
So what I mean,
What if there is a
there
resistance?
like I think the it's not my job. If you think about it that way, my job is to actually carry this from here to there. Why is quality playing a role in this? Well, maybe as you're carrying it, you happen to drop something, not report. That might actually have an impact on the process and the policies and not record it. It could be whatever the reason. I'm just trying to pick a simple. So having that accountability individually and establishing that responsibility individually is important. And there are individuals always going to be not really care. But that's why system has to be strong. If there's more of us caring about it, reporting about the bad issues and so forth, that's okay. This is why the large organizations establish systems where you can ombudsmen and so forth, you can actually report anything. It could be problem around the quality, problem around privacy, whatever it is that you think. It is the system. No one holds grudges. No one holds people, those whistleblowers and so forth. There's a protection around it. This is why it's important. That was a very good question.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question again. Do we have more questions?
I'm hoping.
Okay, let me summarize. So data governance, we hear operational efficiency, legal regulatory compliance, better risk management, control, maintain visibility of data accesses. Do you think that data governance also provide a competitive advantage to a company?
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is why we're seeing those companies who are seeing some growth when they have actually proper way of doing this thing. Revenue growth is real. And if you don't have a proper governance around how you're going to build these things, you will be shut down. If you're a company and you've done this thing wrong, clearly you'll be taken out because either the users will reject you because they don't trust you, the company, or the systems, the regulators, the governments, the states, and what have you, they will come after you. And we're seeing it already. Now, I don't have to read the papers for you, but OpenAI is being sued by how many now? There were the singers, the poets, the authors. And I actually smiled. I wonder if they took a digital copy of our book and used it in their training too. It's because not everybody starts thinking. So if you're a startup, I advise tons of startups, you have to start thinking, okay, what should I do about data governance? Because you may be too far out and deep in it to back out. Maybe you created something really good, but you're using it based on a bad data or data that doesn't belong to you. Guess what? You won't be able to use it. And you lost all that revenue opportunity.
Thank you, Evren. We have time for one more question. In the chat, how would you recommend industries contribute to regulation conversation? Where to start?
That's a very good question. So in the organizations that I worked with, we always had quality assurance, regulatory assurance organizations. Their jobs were to regularly meet with the regulators. It was my job as the top person to really meet with them and explain. They would interview me and question me and my team and so forth. But that arm is somewhere in there. If that arm doesn't exist, if you're in the finance industry, you can actually find interacting with the financial regulators. They publish often where they're headed, and they actually have forums that you can go into. They have conferences that they invite folks, and I have given many talks about these topics in those forums for users, providers, regulators to come together and discuss. You can make it in a public environment, or you can make it individual. You can actually invite them, or there are consultants out there who have worked in those regulatory environments and provide their services to build. Hey, I'm trying to establish something. Can you help me put the blueprint in here? And then we can go start talking and engaging with them. So this is a practice that's been done by highly regulated industries often. Very nice question. Thank you.
Thank you again, Evren. Thank you for the question.
Very good.
All right, so that will close our session today. Thank you very much to the panelists, to all the participants who joined us today. Wishing you a great day ahead.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.